afternoon, all. Thank you so much for joining us and making time to learn about the professions of speech, of communication sciences and disorders. My name is Olebeng Mahura, and I am a speech and language therapist. I am going to share a PowerPoint with you while I take you through what communication sciences and disorders is. With the browser open, please type in menti.com and I will ask you to take part in a poll a little bit later. Please leave your browser open on menti.com and I will provide you with a code that you need in order to take part in this poll and to interact with us. I'll start by giving a description of what speech language pathology is, which is also referred to as speech language therapy. We have a wide scope of practice, which means that we work with people with various types of communication difficulties, and also people of different ages. But before I go into this information, I would like to get an idea of what you think speech and language therapists or speech and language pathologists do. Please type in this code. It shows on the screen. Please type it into menti.com and indicate what you think speech and language therapy does. I'll just wait for a few seconds while you log in. The code, if you can't see it well, it's 75665245. So what do speech and language therapists do? Do we help people with swallowing difficulties? Do we help people who have difficulty speaking in public? Do we help people who have difficulty pronouncing words clearly? Those with voice difficulties or learning difficulties. So do we work with people with all the difficulties indicated here, or only a certain number of difficulties indicated on the poll? Okay, so while we wait for the results to come up, I'll just take you through briefly what speech and language therapists do, and perhaps we can come back to the poll to see what the various answers are. So speech and language pathology is a profession that deals with the assessment. Okay, so we have the results are back. So all the answers are correct. So we definitely don't help people who have difficulty speaking in public. So we help those with swallowing disorders, those who have difficulty pronouncing words, those with voice difficulties as well as learning difficulties. And I'll just take you through some of these various difficulties that we work with. So you all have a pretty good idea of what speech and language therapists actually do. Okay, so as I was saying, speech and language pathology is a profession that deals with the assessment and treatment of communication disorders. These could include speech and or language difficulties. I mentioned earlier that we have a wide scope of practice, which means that we treat a lot of different communication difficulties, as well as the fact that we work with people of different ages, so from child into adulthood. We work with people with speech difficulties, and this includes people who have difficulty pronouncing speech sounds or even putting these speech sounds together in order to form words. An example of speech difficulty would include someone who has a lisp or even stuttering. We also work with people with language disorders. This includes children and adults who may have difficulty understanding when they're spoken to, so difficulty understanding language, or even difficulty understanding what they read. Language disorders also include difficulty forming sentences in order to communicate or get your messages across. So those are what language disorders are. in children, language disorders occur because of developmental disorders. So children who might have autism spectrum disorders. So I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with autism spectrum disorders, but those are the kinds of children that we would work with language disorders. And we see language difficulties in adults following a stroke, or even after a brain injury following a car accident or other types of traumatic accidents. We work with children and adults who have swallowing disorder, and this kind of problem puts the individual at risk for nutrition and other health-related issues, such as pneumonia. So this is a picture of a speech and language therapist assessing this individual's ability to swallow safely. We help children with literacy difficulties, as these are often found in children with language difficulties. So they'll have difficulty learning because they don't understand language. Additionally, we help to set up alternative means of communication for individuals who are unable to express themselves verbally. So if you have a look at the picture at the bottom, this is of a child who uses an alternative means of communication. So this would be in the form of an electronic device, but we also help where communication books, where access to such a device is not feasible. Lastly, we work with people who have voice difficulties. And an example of this includes a person who may have had their voice box taken out or removed in surgery as a result of cancer. So because if you, this picture is an example of such an individual, and they would have difficulties making use of their voice since the organ that produces the voice has been removed. So as a speech and language therapist, these are the sort of clients that we work with. And if you think about all the various difficulties that I have mentioned, all of them will negatively affect the quality of life of the individual that we work with. Or the individual who experiences the communication difficulties. So these difficulties have the potential to have the person with a communication disorder to be excluded from everyday life activities because of the difficulty in communication. So our job as speech and language therapists is to advocate for the inclusion of these individuals within their communities as well as within their households. So as well as to improve the quality of life by working specifically on the sort of communication difficulties that they present with. I'm going to pause here and ask you to interact with us once again and to tell us just briefly, based on the kind of work that we do as speech and language therapists, what sort of qualities do you think speech and language therapists ought to have? Okay, so I'm seeing patient. You definitely need a lot of patience, a lot of compassion. So you must be compassionate and adaptable. You must, so there's just one here that says that you must be fluent in multiple languages. This isn't, while being fluent in multiple languages is actually an advantage, we do offer an opportunity for you within our division to learn another language. So for example, we offer isiXhosa and Afrikaans so that you can learn to communicate with people who speak other languages. And because we use language, well, we work with people with language disorders, it's also one of the best ways to learn different languages. So if you have a client who speaks a language that is different from yours, it is an opportunity through providing intervention to actually learn a lot of languages. So Being fluent in multiple languages is an advantage, but there's always an opportunity to learn other languages as you go along. Okay, so those are certainly the qualities that we need as speech and language therapists. I'm just going to pause here. And before I move on to the second profession that we offer in the Communication Sciences and Disorders program, I'm just going to cross over to Nicole Engelbrecht, who is one of our student speech and language therapists. Nicole, can you please share with us why you chose to study speech and language therapy, as well as how your journey has been so far?
Hello, I'm Nicole Engelbrecht and I'm a second year speech student. My journey to becoming a speech therapist started, I think, back when I was in grade 10, and I wasn't entirely sure what I wanted to do. But one of the few professions that I was looking at were computer sciences, occupational therapy, nursing, and even events management, which is very different from obviously speech. When I started doing research into what I potentially was going to do, I found speech therapy. And the more I looked into speech therapy, I realized that it was something that I could do. It was something that I really felt a connection towards. And what further pushed me towards it was when I researched speech in connection to UCT and what the coursework would be. Coursework would be. It was really, really interesting work, and that was the pushing point for me to apply to UCT for speech. And UCT is always, as a born and bred Cape Town girl, I've always wanted to go to speech to UCT. And I spent a year abroad, and during that time, I always wanted to have family around me. So when I decided I was going to UCT, I wanted to be in Cape Town. I wanted to be around family, and going to UCT provided me with that. So that's why I chose UCT. With speech, there have been several challenges and also positives to this degree. The challenges mostly stem from obviously being in the pandemic and having to work online and having to work around that. So MS Teams lectures were really difficult because there's always connection errors or having to teach ourselves. Though we had lectures, it was still a little bit of teaching ourselves. But that being said, our lecturers and tutors were always very, very helpful in getting us the marks we wanted by teaching, giving us private time to teach us. And I just want to mention that my high school, my matric subjects were biology, mathematics, history, and geography. However, when I was in grade 10, I did do 1 year of physics and then dropped it, which did cause some struggle for me for last year, because one of the courses is speech and hearing sciences, which is also called physics of sound. And I found that there was a bit of a struggle for me with grasping some of the concepts, which I was able to get past because I had a really good tutor provided to me by the university, which was really, really helpful. But moving on to the positives, one of the positives come mainly from this year because we get to do clinics, and clinic time is amazing because we get to implement all the knowledge we've learned in the last year in practice. And I have a child that I work with who, when we first started, he said very limited things, and now he still speaks very limited amounts, but he says quite a bit more. And it's so amazing to see that growth in just a few weeks, that the fact that I got to help with that is very, very, very rewarding. And I can't wait to learn further and be able to work with more than just children, because obviously at this point we've already worked with children. But from next year we work with adults, and I'm very interested to see what comes from that. But at the moment, all the clinic work and the improvement that I see in the children I work with is is amazing. And I know I'm gushing, but it's truly so rewarding to see the difference that I get to make in these children's lives. And it has truly cemented my choice of degree. Last year, with the struggle with the pandemic, I was very unsure if I'd chosen the right degree, but this year, getting to actually do my profession that I want has been like, yes, this is what I want to do. So I'm very happy with what I've chosen. And that's kind of where I am in my journey. I've still got quite a few years left, but I cannot wait to see what the future brings in this profession. Yeah, and I'm going to go back to Olabeng, who's going to talk to you guys about audiology, another communication science and disorders program.
Thank you so much, Nicole, for sharing your experience. I do hope it will inspire everyone else who's considering coming into a program to make the choice. Let me just go back to the PowerPoint. I will now take you through what audiology is, but before I do, I would just like to encourage you to please have a look at the poll. And the code is still the same. We'd just love to see if you have an idea of what audiology is all about. Do we have the results are in? We're quickly going to have a look. Helps families to communicate. So you're all right. Help people with balance disorders. Audiologists do that. And they help people start on their hearing journey. And they also stay up to date with new rehabilitation technology, which is very important. A very important aspect of audiology. So you all have a fairly good idea of what audiologists actually do. Okay, and now I'm just going to briefly take you through. I'm just going to briefly take you through some of the things that audiologists do in their day-to-day life. So just to say that audiology is a branch of science that studies hearing and balance, as well as the disorders that relate to both hearing as well as balance. Audiologists also have a wide scope of practice, and they also, like speech and language therapists, get to work with people of different ages. Audiologists help to assess and manage hearing and balance disorders. They promote healthy ear and hearing habits, and they provide rehabilitative services to children and adults with hearing loss. Audiologists also fit hearing aids, which you can see on the picture on the right, in the right corner, and they also provide cochlear implants, which is shown in the picture of the little boy on the left picture, as well as any other devices that help improve people's ability to hear. Audiologists also consult on issues concerning hearing loss that is caused by constant exposure to noise. So, for example, this includes people who are working in mines, factories, or even construction sites where there's constant exposure to loud sounds. They then help to develop programs to help conserve the hearing of these workers. Lastly, audiologists help to manage people with ear-related balance problems, and they manage communication difficulties which are related to hearing loss. And then there's just one last poll where we just want to see what qualities you think audiologists require. Okay, so we're just having a quick look at the results. So you need to have good time management. You need to be compassionate. You also need to be very patient. You need good communication skills, and you need to be able to problem solve. Okay, so you all have a good idea of the sort of qualities that a good audiologist require. So these are just the minimum requirements that you need to meet in order to apply for a degree in either speech and language pathology or audiology. So these are minimum requirements. So if you have higher scores, then that's even great. So what does the road to becoming a speech and language therapist or audiologist look like? So you must complete the 4-year degree in either speech language pathology or audiology, and this is usually followed by 1 year of community service where you are required to work for the National Department of Health. Once you've completed your community service year, you will be certified as an independent practitioner, and you can work in various contexts. Some of these include schools. You can work in your own private practice, or if you work with other people in a private practice, you can also work in a rehabilitation center, or even within the academic space. So working as a clinical educator, a lecturer, as well as a researcher. And lastly, you can continue working for the Department of Health if you wish. So after having completed your 4-year degree, you can continue your studies and complete a master's degree or a doctoral degree after you've completed your master's degree. And in these spaces, in postgraduate studies, there's a lot of opportunity to becoming part of the research community and to making a contribution to developing a profession, as well as the services we provide. And then I just want to thank you all for taking time to join us today. I hope that you'll all consider becoming part of this rewarding profession and to be part of a community that works hard to improve people's lives through helping them to communicate efficiently and thereby helping them connect with other people. And so we look forward to welcoming you in 2022. Thank you. We will take questions. Some of the questions have been answered in the Q&A bubble. So I just want to find out, Tara, are there any specific questions that
Hello, Olubeng. It may be a good idea to just say what the entrance requirements for application in terms of matric subjects would be again.
Okay. So the entrance requirements would be, let's quickly have a look. We have a minute left. So English minimum of 50%, mathematics minimum of 50%. And if you are doing maths literacy, you need to have a minimum score of 70%. And you can have physical science or life science as 50%. And then for the NBT, so the national benchmark test, you need to have a minimum of an intermediate range score. Were there any other questions? I think we have a minute left before the session ends. Okay, if there aren't any further questions, thank you all so much for your time. I hope you'll have a good afternoon further.